I hadn't heard from my son, Michael, for 2 whole weeks. 2 weeks of silence. No calls, no texts, no dad. I'm fine. At first, I told myself he was just busy. Work, friends, maybe even a new girlfriend. But after 14 days, that excuse stopped working. Every parent knows the difference between normal distance and something being terribly wrong. And what I felt was wrong. Deeply wrong. By day 15, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a small bag, got in my Chevy, and drove straight from Pennsylvania to his home in Ohio. The miles blurred together, but my mind never rested. Was he sick? Was he hurt? Or worse, had he decided he didn't want me in his life anymore? That thought cut me deeper than any knife. But I had to face the truth, whatever it was. When I pulled into his street, unease gripped me instantly. Michael's house looked abandoned. The grass was knee-high, the mailbox bulged with envelopes, and the blinds were clamped shut. My son was never the most responsible man, but this wasn't laziness. This was neglect. The kind that comes when someone's not even around. I parked, stepped out, and approached the front porch. The wood creaked under my boots. I knocked. Michael. My voice echoed, unanswered. I rang the doorbell. Nothing. My hand tightened into a fist as I knocked harder. It's Dad. Open up. Still silence. I reached for the doorknob, half expecting it to be locked tight. But to my shock, it twisted under my hand. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the door pushed open, releasing a stale, heavy air that smelled of dust and something I couldn't name. Inside was chaos. The curtains blocked out nearly all sunlight, so the place was dim, lit only by a single lamp buzzing in the corner. Clothes were scattered on the floor, pizza boxes stacked on the counter, and an unfinished glass of water sat on the table, like someone had just been there, maybe hours ago. Michael, I whispered, stepping inside. The floor groaned under my weight. My pulse hammered in my ears. That's when I saw it. On the couch, a blanket lay draped over what looked unmistakably like a body. My blood froze. My throat went dry. I staggered forward, every nerve in my body screaming not to, but I had to know. I had to see. I yanked the blanket away, and what I found underneath wasn't my son. It was a stranger, a man I'd never seen before, and he was staring right at me. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. The stranger on the couch didn't move, but his eyes, those cold, glassy eyes, were locked on mine as if he had been waiting for me. Who the hell are you? I blurted out, my voice cracking between anger and fear. The man didn't answer. His chest rose slowly, proof that he was alive, but there was no recognition in his stare. He looked exhausted, pale, almost hollowed out. His lips twitched like he wanted to speak, but instead he groaned softly and turned his face away. My instinct screamed at me to get out of there, call the cops, do something, but another voice inside whispered, what if Michael is here? What if this man knows where he is? Where's my son? I demanded, stepping closer. My fists were clenched so tight my nails cut into my palms. The man blinked sluggishly, then muttered in a hoarse voice, basement. I froze. Basement. My heart hammered against my ribs as though it wanted to escape my chest. Slowly, I backed away, keeping my eyes locked on him. Don't move, I said instinctively, though he didn't look capable of moving anywhere. The hallway toward the basement door felt like a tunnel swallowing me whole. Every step creaked under my boots, and the air grew colder, heavier. When I reached the door, I noticed something odd. There was a chain lock hanging loosely, as though it had been broken open. My hands trembled as I grabbed the handle. For a moment, I thought of turning back, of calling the police right then and there. But what if Michael was down there? What if he needed me now? I pulled the door open. A rush of damp, earthy air hit my face, carrying with it the unmistakable smell of mildew and something metallic. Blood. I descended the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath me. The single bulb overhead flickered, casting long, broken shadows across the concrete walls. Michael. My voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. Silence. Then, movement. From the far corner of the basement, I heard chains rattling. My stomach dropped. I stepped closer, my eyes adjusting to the dim light, and there he was. My son. My Michael. He was sitting on the floor, his hands bound, his face bruised and pale, but alive. His eyes widened the second he saw me. Dad, he gasped, his voice hoarse. You shouldn't be here, get out. I froze in place. Relief and terror clashed inside me. I wanted to run to him, to rip those chains off, but before I could take another step, I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, echoing down the stairs behind me. I turned slowly, my heart in my throat. And there, at the top of the stairs, stood a shadowed figure, watching me. The figure at the top of the stairs didn't move. He just stood there, blocking the only exit, his face swallowed by shadows. My pulse roared in my ears. For a moment, the basement felt like a coffin, closing in on me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. The man didn't answer. Instead, he started down the stairs, slowly, one heavy step at a time. Each creak of the wood echoed like a gunshot in the silence. My son's eyes went wide with panic. "Dad, don't." Michael's voice cracked. "Stay back, please." But it was too late. The stranger had reached the bottom. The dim light flickered across his face, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his skin weathered like old leather. His eyes burned with something I couldn't quite read. Anger, maybe, or a sick kind of satisfaction. "You shouldn't have come here," he said finally, his voice low, gravelly, like it had been dragged across stone. My fists clenched instinctively. "That's my son. Let him go. Now." The man smirked, shaking his head. "He doesn't belong to you anymore." The words sent a chill down my spine. I stepped in front of Michael, my body shaking but ready to fight if I had to. "If you think I'm going to stand here and watch you hurt him, you don't understand," the man interrupted, his tone calm but terrifyingly final. "This isn't about you. It never was." Michael tugged at his chains desperately. "Dad, please, just go. He's dangerous. You can't win against him." My heart shattered hearing my son's desperation. Every fiber of my being told me to run, to save myself. But how could I? How could a father abandon his child, chained and broken, in the basement of a stranger? I squared my shoulders. "If you want him, you'll have to go through me." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he studied me like I was some puzzle he had already solved. Then, with sudden violence, he lunged forward. I wasn't ready. His hand shot out, slamming me against the wall. Pain exploded through my back, and the air rushed from my lungs. Michael screamed, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Stop, please." I struggled, clawing at the man's grip, but he was impossibly strong. His face leaned close to mine, his breath hot and bitter. "You want to play hero? Heroes die first." Before I could react, I heard something, metal scraping against concrete. My son. He was dragging his chains, trying to reach for something in the corner of the basement. The man's attention flickered toward him for just a second. And that was enough. With every ounce of strength I had left, I slammed my fist into his jaw. He stumbled back, surprised, and I gasped for air, my chest burning. Michael's eyes locked on mine. "Dad, behind you." I spun around and froze. There was another figure standing in the doorway now. Another figure filled the doorway. Taller, leaner, but with the same unsettling stillness as the man I had just fought off. His face was obscured by the poor lighting, but his presence was enough to make the air in the basement feel heavier. My chest tightened. One was already more than I could handle. Two. This was a death sentence. The first man wiped the blood from his lip where I had struck him and let out a low chuckle. "You really thought you could come in here and take him back? Do you even know what you've walked into?" The second figure descended the stairs, each step deliberate, his boots echoing against the walls. My son shrank back, his chains clinking as he pressed himself into the corner. "Dad." Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "That's him. He's the one who started it all." The words sent ice through my veins. The newcomer finally stepped into the dim light. He was younger than the first man, maybe in his 30s, clean-cut in a way that didn't belong in this rotting basement. His dark hair was neatly combed, his shirt buttoned all the way to the collar, like he had just come from a Sunday service. But his eyes, God, his eyes, were wrong. Empty, but burning all the same. "So," he said calmly, folding his hands behind his back, "you must be the father." I forced myself to stand straighter, ignoring the throbbing pain in my ribs. "Who the hell are you? And why is my son chained up like an animal?" He tilted his head, studying me like I was some curious specimen. "Your son made choices. Choices that brought him here. You don't get to undo them just because you're his father." "Choices?" My voice cracked with rage. "He's my kid. Whatever mistakes he made, you don't get to do this to him." The younger man smirked faintly, then turned his gaze toward Michael. He didn't tell you, did he? About what he owes? About the promises he broke? Michael's face went pale. Dad, don't listen to him. Please. Just go. Get out while you can. No, I said firmly, shaking my head. I'm not leaving you behind. Not to these psychos. The first man, the one with the brute strength, stepped closer again, his shadow swallowing me. We warned him. We gave him chances. Now the debt comes due. Debt? I echoed. My eyes darted between the two men. What are you talking about? Neither of them answered. The younger one just smiled thinly, then nodded toward the stairs. Take him upstairs. He should see for himself. Before I could react, the brute's hand clamped down on my shoulder like iron. I tried to fight, but his grip was unbreakable. He shoved me toward the steps, dragging me away from my son. Michael shouted, his voice breaking, Dad, don't go with them. They'll. The door slammed shut before he could finish. I was shoved into the living room, gasping for air, my mind spinning. The younger man followed behind, calm as ever, like he was leading me on some twisted tour. He gestured to the window, pulling the blinds open for the first time. Outside, a van sat parked by the curb. Its back doors were wide open. Inside, I saw ropes, chains, and something else, documents, stacks of them, marked with names I didn't recognize. The man leaned closer, his voice low and venomous. Your son isn't the only one. And soon, neither will you be. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would tear through my chest. The van outside sat like a silent threat, its open doors gaping like the jaws of a predator. The younger man watched me closely, his calm demeanor more terrifying than the brute's violence. What do you want from me? I demanded, my voice hoarse. If this is about money, I'll find a way. Just let my son go. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. Money? You think this is about money? No, Mr. Parker, this is about loyalty. Your son broke his, and now you've wandered into the middle of something you don't understand. The way he said my last name made my skin crawl. They knew me. They knew us. I swallowed hard, refusing to let him see the fear burning inside me. Then explain it. What did Michael do? Why are you keeping him like that? The brute finally spoke again, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. He ran. That's all you need to know. He ran from us, and there's no running twice. I clenched my fists. That's my son, and if you think I'll let you keep him down there, you don't know me at all. The younger man's expression sharpened. He leaned in, his voice just above a whisper. That's where you're wrong. We know exactly who you are. We know what you've done, and we know how far a father will go. A chill ran down my spine. What you've done? What the hell was he talking about? Before I could answer, he straightened up and gestured toward the van. Come. It's time you see the bigger picture. The brute shoved me forward again, steering me out the front door. The late afternoon sun blinded me for a moment, making the world feel too bright, too normal compared to the nightmare inside. The neighborhood was quiet, almost eerily so. Not a single neighbor peeked out, not a car passed by. It was as if the whole street had been emptied just for them. When we reached the van, the younger man pulled a file from the stack inside. He opened it slowly, deliberately, then held it out to me. My breath caught when I saw what was inside. Photos. Dozens of them. Michael, at different times, different places, leaving work, meeting friends, even sitting in a diner. They had been watching him for months. What is this? I asked, my voice shaking. Proof, the younger man replied. Proof that your son belongs to us now. He made a deal, and deals like this don't just vanish because you drove 300 miles to play hero. My throat tightened. Michael had never told me anything about this. Whatever he was involved in, it was bigger and darker than I could have imagined. You've got it wrong, I said desperately. He's just a kid who made a mistake. Let me fix it. Whatever he owes, whatever he promised, I'll take his place. For the first time, the man's calm mask cracked. His smile widened, but it wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile that told me I'd just stepped into a trap. That's exactly what we were hoping you'd say, he whispered. The brute slammed the van doors shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the empty street. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my son's life anymore. I had just volunteered my own. The van doors slammed shut, and the sound reverberated through my skull. I stumbled back, breathing hard, but the brute's hand clamped down on my shoulder before I could take another step. His grip was like a vice, unyielding, dragging me closer to the vehicle. Get in. the younger man said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to fight, to do something. But Michael was still chained in that basement. If I bolted now, they'd punish him, maybe even kill him. My only chance was to stay close, to play along until I figured out what the hell was going on. I climbed into the van, the stale air inside pressing down on me. The brute followed, shutting the doors behind us, sealing me in darkness. For a few moments, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the hum of the engine starting. Then the younger man's voice cut through the silence. You asked what this is about. Let me enlighten you. The van lurched forward, pulling away from the curb. The windows were blacked out, so I had no sense of where we were heading. The man flipped open another folder and tossed it onto my lap. Inside were more photos, but not just of Michael. There were pictures of me leaving my house, me walking into the grocery store, me at my job, even one of me standing by my wife's grave last year, flowers in hand. My blood turned to ice. You've been following me? I whispered. The man smiled faintly. We don't follow. We watch. And we wait. Your son was only the beginning. You were always part of this story, whether you realized it or not. I shook my head, my chest tightening. No, you've got the wrong family. We don't owe you anything. The brute laughed darkly from across the van. That's where you're wrong. Bloodlines carry debts. Fathers pass them down whether they mean to or not. I stared at them, unable to process the words. Bloodlines. Debts. My mind scrambled back through the years, searching for any connection, any thread that could explain this insanity. Nothing made sense. Where are you taking me? I demanded. The younger man leaned back, his eyes glinting in the dim light. Home. The words sent a chill crawling up my spine. Home. The ride dragged on in suffocating silence. Finally, the van slowed, turning onto what felt like a gravel road. When the doors opened again, I was met with the sight of an old farmhouse, isolated in the middle of nowhere. Its windows were dark, its paint peeling, the fields around it overgrown. The brute shoved me out, and I stumbled onto the dirt. The air smelled of damp earth and rot. Inside, the younger man ordered. I hesitated, glancing back toward the van, toward the road beyond. But there was no road, just endless stretches of trees. They'd brought me somewhere no one could find me. I stepped toward the farmhouse, every nerve in my body screaming danger. The porch sagged under my weight, and when the door opened, the stench of mildew and decay washed over me. Inside, the walls were lined with shelves filled with more folders, more photos, more names. Dozens of families, dozens of lives cataloged like insects in a collection. The younger man stepped past me, pulling one folder from the shelf. He opened it, scanned the page, then looked at me with a faint smile. Your family's history is deeper than you think, Mr. Parker. And tonight, you're going to learn everything your son was too afraid to tell you. The farmhouse reeked of mold and secrets. Dust floated in the stale air, catching the dim glow of a single bulb that swung lazily from the ceiling. The younger man laid the folder flat on a crooked wooden table and gestured for me to sit. The brute loomed behind me like a wall of muscle, his presence making escape impossible. I lowered myself into the rickety chair, my hands clenched tight on my knees. My mind screamed at me to stay alert, to memorize every detail, exits, distances, weaknesses, anything that might give me an edge later. The younger man slid the folder toward me. Go ahead. Take a look. I hesitated, then opened it. My breath caught instantly. Inside were yellowed documents, old photographs, even handwritten letters. My eyes widened as I recognized one face. A man who looked eerily like me, only older. My father. What is this? I whispered, my voice trembling. The man's smile never wavered. Your father was one of us. The words hit me like a hammer. My father had died decades ago, when I was barely out of high school. He had been a quiet man, strict but loving, working long hours at a steel mill. Nothing about him screamed this. You're lying, I said sharply, though doubt was already gnawing at me. He shook his head slowly. The debts your son carries were born long before he was. Your father made promises he couldn't keep. And just like any debt, it doesn't disappear. It passes down. To him. To you. I shoved the folder back across the table. No, my father was a good man. He worked himself to the bone for us. He wasn't mixed up in whatever the hell this is. The brute leaned down, his breath hot against my ear. Good men die the worst deaths. I flinched but held my ground, glaring at them both. Why chain up my son? If this is about my father, then leave Michael out of it. The younger man's eyes glinted dangerously. He tried to run. That was his mistake. He thought he could walk away from something that's in his blood. My stomach twisted. Michael, my boy. He must have found out about this nightmare, maybe by accident, and tried to escape. That's why he hadn't called. That's why he vanished. Where does this end? I asked, my voice breaking. What do you want from me? The younger man leaned forward, folding his hands. We want you to finish what your father started. We want you to step into his place. I froze. My father's place. My head spun with questions. What had Dad been part of? What had he left unfinished? And if I refuse? I asked quietly. The brute's hand slammed down on the table so hard it cracked. Then your son pays with his life. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could barely hear over the pounding in my ears. My entire world narrowed to a single thought. I couldn't lose Michael. Finally, I forced the words out, bitter as poison. What do I have to do? The younger man smiled, cold and triumphant. He closed the folder gently, almost tenderly, then slid it back onto the shelf. First, he said softly, you'll swear loyalty. Then you'll prove it. Swear loyalty? I repeated, my throat dry. To what exactly? The younger man's smile widened just enough to chill me. Not what? Who? He snapped his fingers, and the brute disappeared through a side door. Moments later, he returned with a heavy, dust-covered chest. He set it on the table in front of me with a dull thud that rattled the room. The younger man unlocked it with a small iron key. Inside were strange objects, old ledgers, tarnished coins, and a black book bound in cracked leather. The sight of it made my skin crawl, as though the air itself grew heavier the moment it was exposed. This, he said, placing a hand on the book, is the oath your father swore. And now it's yours. I shook my head instantly. No, whatever my father did, I won't follow in his footsteps. I came here for my son, not for this madness. The brute's hand tightened on my shoulder, digging into the bone. The younger man leaned closer, his voice soft, almost coaxing. You misunderstand, Mr. Parker. This isn't a choice. You swore the moment you walked through your son's door. My fists clenched. Rage and fear twisted inside me like wildfire. But then I saw Michael's face in my mind, bruised, chained in that basement, begging me to leave. He had suffered enough. I couldn't let them kill him because of me. I swallowed hard. What does swearing loyalty mean? The younger man's expression shifted, almost satisfied. He pushed the book toward me. You place your hand on this, you speak the words I tell you, and you accept the burden your father left behind. Then, to prove yourself, his eyes gleamed. You'll carry out a task for us. Something simple. Something final. My stomach churned. What kind of task? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back, watching me squirm in the silence. Then he said, there's someone you must deal with. Someone who betrayed us, just like your son tried to. You'll correct that mistake. My blood turned cold. You're asking me to kill. The brute finished for him, his voice like gravel. I froze, my heart crashing against my ribs. Me? Kill someone? I'd never taken a life in my 60 years. The very thought made bile rise in my throat. I won't, I whispered. The younger man's smile vanished. He snapped the book shut and slammed it onto the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Then your son dies before dawn. The words sliced through me like a blade. My vision blurred, not from the dim light, but from the tears I fought to hold back. They had me cornered, caged. Finally, through clenched teeth, I said, show me. The brute's grip loosened slightly. The younger man's smile returned, cruel and deliberate. He rose to his feet and motioned toward the door. Good, he murmured. Very good. Let's see if blood truly runs in the family. They led me out of the farmhouse into the night. The air was sharp and cold, filled with the chorus of cicadas. In the distance, the van waited with its engine still ticking. I climbed inside, my body trembling, my soul screaming. Somewhere behind us, in that rotting house, my son was chained, his fate hanging on my next decision. And in front of me, they were about to hand me the weapon that would decide both our lives. They handed me the gun like it was an heirloom, heavy, cold, and uncomfortably familiar in my hand. It sat in the palm of my hand with a weight I hadn't felt since my father's funeral, the kind of weight that doesn't belong to the body, but to the decisions you carry. The younger man watched me with an expression that was almost tender, as if he were handing me a badge, not a weapon. You understand the rules, he said. No witnesses. No mercy. Finish it cleanly, and your son wakes up tomorrow. His voice was soft, practiced, like someone reciting lines he'd heard 1,000 times. We drove until the road narrowed and the dark swallowed the trees. The farmhouse faded behind us like a bad dream. The van stopped outside a small lakeside town that smelled of tar and old coffee. Neon buzzed from a diner window. A single gas station light blinked in the distance. Nothing here seemed part of whatever ledger these men kept. It could have been any town, any life. That was the point: anonymity, disposal. They gave me a file, a name, a photograph, a brief note. Daniel Hayes. Lives alone. Saturday mornings, 7:30, diner. The photograph was grainy. A man about my age, maybe a decade older, wearing a sweater and a cautious smile. I stared at his face until the black and white image blurred. Daniel Hayes. No ringing bells. No connection sprang to mind. That should have made it easier. Instead, my stomach rolled. They dropped me off 2 blocks from the diner and told me to walk in like a customer. You don't have to be violent, the younger man said on the curb, a thin lie exposing his teeth. You only have to be convincing. Inside the diner, light pooled over Formica tables and chrome. The regulars were half asleep over coffee cups. Daniel Hayes sat by the window, hands wrapped around a mug, looking at the lake as if the water could answer all questions. He was smaller in person, softer around the eyes than the picture suggested, with laugh lines that could have belonged to any man who'd raised a family. My heart hammered. I took a seat a few booths away, the gun hidden beneath my jacket like a dark promise. My hand shook so badly I spilled coffee on the Formica. The waitress, a woman with tired perfume, smiled with the practiced warmth of people who see trouble and choose not to name it. Daniel glanced up. Our eyes met. For a second, I didn't recognize him. Then a memory stabbed through the fog. A backyard barbecue from 30 years ago, my father handing me a hot dog while a lanky man laughed at a joke about the mill. Daniel's voice had been part of the soundtrack of my childhood. He had helped my father when the furnace broke. He had carried a box at my father's funeral. Faces that once felt ordinary now lay tangled with the ledger on the farmhouse shelves. My hand went numb. The irony stunned me. The men who kept ledgers of debts had turned my memory into proof. They had twisted kindness into collateral. I imagined Daniel, a friend of my father's or a neighbor, reduced to a target because my father's past had been a knot no one could untie. Daniel stood, stretching slowly, and moved to the counter to pay. I followed him out, heel to heel, breath shallow. The air outside smelled of diesel and lakeweed. He paused by his car, and the sunlight hit his face. For a moment, he looked like the man in the photograph, ordinary and unassuming. I stepped forward. My mouth was dry. My fingers found the grip of the gun as if by instinct. I could feel the sun on my back, the weight of my son's face in my mind, the ledger's cruel neatness in the farmhouse, all of it sitting on the edge of the decision I had to make. Excuse me, I said, voice brittle. Daniel turned, surprised, then softened when he saw me. Can I talk to you for a second? It's important. He smiled, the way friendly strangers do when danger hasn't learned to hide in them yet. Sure, he said. You okay, friend? His voice was ordinary, human, full of the small decencies that had once kept neighbors alive. In that ordinary sound was the test, and the trap. My finger trembled on the trigger. The world narrowed to the sight of his face and the echo of the younger man's promise. Finish it cleanly, and your son wakes up tomorrow. Daniel looked at me, open, unarmed. For an impossible second, I saw not a target but the ghost of my father's life. Kind, flawed, painfully human. Do it, something in my head barked. Do it and save him. Don't, another voice, mine, but softer, begged. I inhaled. Daniel waited, unknowing, leaning on the hood of his car, the lake breathing slow beyond him. My hand tightened. The gun's metal bit into my skin. And then Daniel said my name. Tom. The syllable dropped like a stone into still water. My finger froze on the trigger. His voice hit me like a hook. For a stunned second, everything slowed. Wheels, birds, the small mundane noises of the morning, and the gun in my hand felt grotesque, an object that didn't belong in any memory I wanted. Daniel's face looked open and familiar, The kind of face that belongs to barbecues and neighborly favors, not to ledgers written in the margins of a rotten book. "Tom," he said again, softer, concern furrowing his brow. "You look like you could use a seat." I realized I was standing in the middle of the parking lot, the sun-warm asphalt under my shoes, balancing a choice that felt impossible. My son was 100 miles away. No, closer. He was wherever those men said he was, in a basement that smelled of damp and fear. If I fired the gun, the ledger keepers would keep their end of the bargain. Michael would wake. If I didn't, if I threw this away, would they kill him anyway? Would the ledger boys let me go because I'd chosen mercy? They had proved themselves cruel and clever enough to make me doubt every assumption. My voice broke. I had rehearsed threats and bargains in the van, a litany of promises that made my throat raw. None of them matched the taste of this moment. I could feel the life I had once known, the small world of my father, of furnaces fixed and stories swapped, pulling like an anchor toward a better self. Daniel looked at me with an easy sympathy. "Hey, listen, why don't you sit with me for a minute? Coffee's on me." He nodded toward the diner's door. His kindness felt like a salve I didn't deserve, and for one heartbeat I nearly accepted it. But the ledger men had eyes everywhere. I couldn't trust the pause. I thought of my son, his laugh, the way he used to jam the car stereo too loud, the nights he came home drunk and apologetic. I thought of the blood on his lip in that basement, eyes pleading. A different kind of math settled in me. What kind of father would I be if I traded another man's life for my son's? Could I live with that? The thought made bile rise in my throat. My hands trembled. The gun was heavy in my jacket, a cold presence against my skin. I took a step back from Daniel and swallowed hard. "I need air," I said, and it was the truth. He nodded, watching me with an expression of puzzled concern. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Tom. If you need help." "No," I interrupted, not giving him the chance to learn too much. I couldn't pull him into this, couldn't let another good man become collateral to the ledger's cruelty. I staggered to the trash can behind the diner. Hands numb, I shoved the gun into the metal mouth and slammed the lid shut. The action felt both ridiculous and monumental, like flushing a coin down a well and expecting the debt to vanish. My heart hammered so loud I could hardly hear myself think. I expected sirens, a shout, the van's engine revving into life. Instead, the world kept its slow, ordinary rotation. A dog barked somewhere. A truck rolled by. No one. I slammed the trash lid and waited for an alarm that never came. The lot stayed ordinary. A dog barked, a truck rolled by, neon hummed. My phone buzzed in my pocket like a heartbeat. Unknown, we saw. Midnight. Farmhouse. They knew. Of course they knew. The ledger men had eyes everywhere. I walked back into the diner and sat at the counter while Daniel topped up my coffee without prying. His quiet made me ache with regret. How do you tell a stranger not to be pulled into your nightmare? Night closed fast. I drove the gravel road with the radio turned down until the farmhouse cut itself out of trees and shadow. They were waiting, the brute by the van, the younger man stepping forward as I climbed out. No pretense, only business. You disposed of it, the younger man said. Clever. He didn't sound pleased. He sounded pleased enough to remind me he was in control. Will Michael be okay? I asked, the words brittle. He'll wake if you keep your part, the younger man replied. He tapped his temple like a metronome marking my time. Inside, shelves held folders thick as Bibles. Names, dates, faces cataloged like specimens. They opened files, men my father had known, favors called in decades, promises inked and kept. The ledger wasn't money alone, it was leverage. Tomorrow you attend a meeting, the younger man said. You speak. Prove your value. Fail, he implied, and the room tasted of finality. I slept on a pallet, dreams of chains. Dawn brought chores and a meeting in a shed behind a shuttered church. Men shuffled maps and whispered names. My chest tightened again when Reverend O'Leary stepped into view. The Reverend had been a kind man who presided at my father's funeral. He mouthed, Tom, a small human signal in a cold machine. At my turn I spoke of community projects and river cleanups, careful, measured. Someone in the back chuckled, a hollow sound. Reverend O'Leary pulled me aside. Tom, what's wrong? He asked quietly. His compassion made hope flare. Maybe the favors Dad earned still meant something. They think I'll bend. Tomorrow I would attempt bargaining. But tonight, Alone in the old farmhouse, I let myself imagine the opposite. A ragged coalition of old neighbors, ex-colleagues from the mill, people who remembered Dad when he wasn't a set of ledger entries. It was dangerous, messy, illegal maybe, but it was ours. I sketched a plan. Call Marie from the bakery. She still remembered my father's knack for fixing heaters. Ask Jim at the mill for an old favor owed. Find Nora, who kept the ledger of the town fair. And keep Daniel out of harm's way by feeding him a small lie about errands. Each call felt risky, each favor a borrowed bullet, but combined they might form a net fine enough to catch us if the ledger's web frayed. Be ready. I didn't sleep much that night. The pallet in the corner was as thin as the promises that had brought me here, and every time I closed my eyes I saw Michael's bruised face behind damp concrete. At dawn I made the calls I shouldn't have made. Calls that felt like asking old ghosts for favors. Marie from the bakery answered on the second ring. She remembered my father the way small towns remember saints and sinners alike, in pieces, through favors and favors returned. Tom, she said, surprise and something softer in her voice. I told her little, just enough to remind her of the furnace my father fixed at her shop years ago, the time he patched the church roof after a storm. In the end, she said simply, if you're in trouble, I'm with you. I felt something inside me unclench. Jim from the mill was harder. When I mentioned my last name, his tone changed, the way old men who'd spent decades around boilers and steam change when they smell trouble. He met me at a truck stop an hour later with grease on his hands and a look like he hadn't slept either. Tom, your old man saved my brother from the river once, he said, as if that settled everything. He nodded when I asked for a favor. His crew could help lift heavy things, move vans without drawing attention. It wasn't much, but it was muscle. Muscle was necessary. Nora, nervous Nora who ran the concession stand at the fall fair, was a miracle. She kept records nobody else trusted, scribbled on paper in a way that later proved golden. I kept a list of names your father used to mention, she told me, handing over a folded notebook with entries in a cramped, careful hand. Many names were ordinary. Neighbors, men who cut hay, kids who grew up and left. But in one column, circled in blue, was a sequence of initials and a tiny note I couldn't parse at first. Old ledgers. Call before meeting. I folded the page into my wallet like a secret map. We met that night in a place that would never be suspected, the back room of the church where Reverend O'Leary kept the coats. It smelled faintly of mothballs and holy water. The plan was messy and crude. 3 trucks, 2 diversion routes. Daniel as a decoy to distract the ledger's watchers, while Jim's crew broke into the farmhouse to get Michael free. Marie would be the signal. When her first batch of morning buns hit the countertop at the diner, Jim moved. It was the sort of plan stitched together from favors and memory. It was also the only plan I had. As the sun dipped, I felt the old town breathe around me. The small, steady rhythms I had nearly forgotten. Faces I hadn't seen in years passed by the church window. Old men with stooped shoulders, a kid with a skateboard, someone watering a lawn. For a few flashing seconds I allowed myself to believe we might pull this off. Hope is a dangerous thing when you're playing with ledgers, but it is the only thing that keeps your hands from shaking. We practiced the signals and whispers. Daniel, bless him, insisted on being useful. He wanted a role, not to be a memory in some ledger boy's file. He agreed to sit at the diner counter for the morning shift, to talk loudly about nonsense, to be visible and ordinary. No strange moves, I told him. Just be a man having coffee. He laughed once, a brittle little sound, and nodded. At midnight, I slipped out to the van where Jim's crew waited, throttle low, engines humming like a chorus of restless insects. Nora handed me a folded list of names she thought might be useful. Watch for the second initial, J. T., she said. That's a name your father used to call, decades ago. If you hear it, it's probably their signal. I tucked the paper into my pocket as if it were a talisman. We moved like shadows. The town slept, unaware. The farmhouse loomed in the distance, a black blot on the horizon. We crept to the edge of its property, and I felt every heartbeat in my chest like a drum. From the trees came the distant hum of the van that had brought me here the first time. I signaled with a quick, practiced motion. Jim's men responded with soft rustles. Then my phone buzzed, a single, unknown number. I glanced at the screen. The message was short and precise, the kind of cruelty that doesn't need flourishes. Moved. New location. 30 minutes. For a moment, the world narrowed to that text. 30 minutes. We weren't ready. I felt the floor drop under me in a way that made my stomach rise into my throat. The plan we'd built from favors and memories had a hole blown through it with 3 words. Someone had betrayed us, or they were better watched than we thought. Behind me, a twig snapped. I froze. The twig snap was sharp, too close. I spun, heart pounding, and saw a silhouette step from the trees. For one burning second, I thought it was Jim or one of his crew circling back, but then the figure spoke in a low, steady voice that froze the marrow in my bones. Too late, Tom. It was the younger man. His calmness was worse than a shout. Behind him, 2 more shapes melted out of the dark, watchers with flashlights dimmed, guns slung low. They had been there the whole time, shepherding us without our knowing. Jim cursed under his breath. Marie gasped. Daniel stiffened. My allies, these ordinary souls pulled into my father's mess, were staring down a machine far sharper than us. The younger man stepped closer, the gravel crunching under his boots. He held up my phone, the one that had just buzzed. You didn't think we'd let you plot unsupervised, did you? Every call you made, every whisper, every meeting in that church, we heard it all. Shame burned hot in my throat. I'd thought myself clever, weaving neighbors into an old web of favors. But I'd only painted targets on their backs. Where's my son? I demanded, my voice raw, cracking. The man tilted his head. Moved, as I said. We adapt. We always adapt. That's why we've lasted generations while men like your father, men who think loyalty is optional, rot in their graves. The brute emerged next, hauling something heavy. A chair. A body tied to it. My knees nearly buckled. Michael. His head hung low, but when the brute dumped him on the dirt, he stirred. His eyes fluttered open, dazed, then widened when he saw me. Dad, he rasped. I dropped to my knees, reaching for him, but the brute shoved me back with a boot. Pain flared through my ribs. Enough of this, the younger man said, his calm cracking into irritation. The debt must be closed tonight. He signaled toward one of his men, who handed me a familiar weight, my gun. They'd dug it out of the diner trash, polished my failure into fresh humiliation. Finish what you started with, Hayes, he ordered. Or we finish him. He nodded at Michael. My son's voice tore through the night, hoarse but fierce. Don't do it, Dad. Don't. The gun in my hand felt like fire. My fingers trembled as I lifted it, but I wasn't aiming at Daniel Hayes anymore. I was aiming at the face of a choice that had been rigged from the beginning. I looked at Michael, then at Daniel, then at my neighbors, their terrified faces watching me, trusting me. My father's ghost was here too, heavy on my shoulders. He had started this ledger of debts. Now it lived in me. Do it, the younger man pressed, his voice sharp now. Prove your loyalty. The air was still, save for cicadas and my son's shallow breathing. I tightened my grip, breath coming in ragged bursts. I had one shot to change everything, one bullet to cut through years of chains. I raised the gun and fired. The shot cracked like a dry branch. Time folded, sound and light collapsing into one instant. Daniel Hayes doubled over, clutching his shoulder. The gun clattered from my hand and skittered across gravel. A shout cut the air. Michael screamed. The world narrowed to motion and pain. Men moved fast, closing in like wolves. One dragged Daniel toward a pickup. Another hauled me back, boots digging into dirt. The brute's grip on my shoulder was iron. Good, the younger man hissed. You followed through. Loyalty costs. Daniel's blood darkened his shirt. He looked at me with a stunned, questioning sorrow that felt worse than any accusation. He tried to speak. His lips moved, and I tried to reach him, but hands held me fast. My head spun with adrenaline and a sick, hollow clarity. I had killed a man who had helped my family. They shoved Daniel into the van. He caught my eye, mouthed something, then the doors slammed. I wanted to run after him, to apologize, to explain the horror of being forced into such a choice, but they pushed me toward the farmhouse. Inside, they tied me to a chair with coarse rope. The younger man set the black book on the table and opened it like a priest revealing scripture. You are marked now, he said. Speak for the ledger tomorrow. This was your initiation. No, I rasped. You can't make me. He smiled, cold and patient. There is no can't here. Only consequence. Alone and bound, the farmhouse seemed to breathe around me. The rope cut into my wrists, My hands trembled. I tasted copper and guilt. Images of my father, fixing a furnace, laughing over a beer, warred with Daniel's stunned face and Michael's chained fear. My single act to save my son had become a razor that sliced others. Footsteps returned. The younger man reappeared, closing the book. He tapped a line with his finger and looked up. You'll say what we tell you. Show loyalty in public, and your son wakes. Refuse, and the ledger collects again. A muffled cough came from the back room. Hope flared. Someone still alive, a loose thread. Then silence swallowed it. I swallowed bile. What exactly do you want me to say? I asked, voice raw. He leaned close. You will tell the circle that your family honors the ledger, that debts bind us all. You will praise the order that protects us. Say it earnestly. Convince them you are one of us. Convince them. Lie for my son's life. The words felt like poison. I thought of Daniel's face, of neighbors who had lent me favor, of Marie and Jim and Nora. People dragging themselves into this because of me. You'll get your chance, he said, standing. Tomorrow, in the circle. Fail to convince, and you'll watch what happens when loyalty is broken. Live. They left me alone with the rope and the book and the taste of blood in my mouth. Outside, a wolf howled, distant and uninterested, and the ledger's pages waited in the dark for me to become something I would not recognize. I swore I would make this right. The night dragged on like an endless sentence. My wrists burned from the rope, and every creak of the farmhouse felt like the house itself was leaning in to listen. I thought of Michael, his voice in the basement, begging me not to do it. I thought of Daniel bleeding in the van. And I thought of my father, the man who had started this nightmare without ever telling me. By dawn, they came for me. The brute untied me, yanking me to my feet, while the younger man carried the black book under his arm as though it were sacred scripture. We drove in silence to the meeting place, an abandoned barn on the edge of a cornfield. Cars lined the dirt road, dozens of them. More men, more families bound to this ledger I still couldn't fully understand. Inside, a circle had formed. Men stood shoulder to shoulder, faces lit by lanterns hung from hooks. Some were young, eager, others were weathered, resigned. At the center stood a podium, bare except for the black book. The younger man placed it down, then gestured to me. Our newest initiate, son of John Parker, father of Michael Parker, bound by blood, by oath, by debt. His words echoed against the barn walls. All eyes turned to me. My knees nearly buckled under the weight of their stares. This was the moment. They wanted me to swear loyalty, to praise the ledger, to become part of the very machine that had stolen my father, my son, and now Daniel. I stepped forward. My voice cracked at first, but then steadied. My father made choices. Choices I didn't understand until now. And my son, my throat closed, but I pushed on. They told me loyalty is everything, that debts must be paid. But loyalty built on fear isn't loyalty. It's slavery. A murmur rippled through the circle. The younger man's eyes narrowed. I raised my voice, trembling but fierce. My father wasn't perfect, but he taught me something these ledgers will never teach you. He taught me that a man's word only matters if it's given freely. You can chain my son, you can spill my blood, but you will never own us. Gasps and shouts erupted. Some men looked shocked, others furious, but a few lowered their eyes, as if I had cracked something inside them. The brute surged forward, fury etched into every line of his body. The younger man raised a hand, stopping him, but his calm veneer was gone. Fool, he spat. Do you think defiance frees you? It only damns you. In that moment, chaos struck. The barn doors burst open. Jim's truck roared in, headlights flooding the room. Marie shouted from the cab, Nora clutching a radio. My neighbors, ordinary people with extraordinary courage, had come through. Confusion exploded. Some men scattered, others drew weapons, but the circle had been broken. In the chaos, I saw Michael stumble in through the side, chains broken, Daniel limping behind him, bloodied but alive. Our eyes met. My son's voice cracked through the noise. Dad, run. I grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the open night as gunfire erupted behind us. The brute roared. The younger man shouted orders, but the barn was chaos now, a war of debts unraveling. We fled into the cornfield, stalks slapping our faces, hearts pounding. Behind us, the ledger's circle tore itself apart. The order my father had once bowed to was crumbling under its own weight. When we finally collapsed in the dirt miles away, Michael clung to me like he had as a boy. His voice shook. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't know how deep it went." I held him tighter than I ever had. "It ends with us," I whispered. "No more debts. No more chains." The sun rose, pale and uncertain, over a world that felt both broken and free. The ledger still existed, scattered in shadows, but for the first time, I believed we had a chance to outrun it. And I swore, as long as I drew breath, no one would ever write my son's name in that book again.